Hello and welcome to this new launch conference, the launch conference of the new version of the Nik Collection version 8. As usual, what we are going to share with you today is under embargo until May the 6th at 3 p.m. Paris time, and by attending this presentation, you accept the terms of this embargo, and we thank you for that in advance. Today for this launch conference, I am with Boris, the product director of the Nik Collection, and I am Nicolas, the chief product evangelist of DxO. Hello, Boris.
Hello, Nicolas. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you today to present the new version of Nik Collection.
New version, new tagline, not only for the new version, we will see that a bit later today. Live in color, dream in black and white. But before digging probably in what's new with this new version of the Nik Collection, can you present us for newcomers or for people who are not, let's say, that comfortable with the Nik Collection, what is the Nik Collection?
Yes, of course. So the Nik Collection is a suite of 7 plugins dedicated to photography. So basically, it's going to turn your host, so being Photoshop or Lightroom, Photolab, Affinity, into a powerhouse to do some photo editing. It can be used as a standalone application as well if you don't want to use any of the hosts I've just named. So you've got 7 plugins. Some are creative, some are more technical. So for the creative part, we've got Vivezza, which is going to allow you to play on saturation and tints. It's a light plugin of the collection. We've got Color Effects, which is the central toolbox, if I can say so, of color editing. You've got Analog Effects, giving you this kind of vintage look on your images. And then you've got Silver Effects, dedicated to black and white photo editing. And then we go to the more technical ones. One which is a bit in the middle, which is HDR Effects, allowing you to merge images together to have a larger dynamic range when you want to do a photo. And then you've got Define, which is going to remove the noise from your images. And you've got Sharpener, which is forked into 2 sections. You've got the pre-sharpening, allowing you to make sure your image is tack sharp when you start. And then you've got Sharpener Output when you want to render your image for social media or if you want to print it and put it on your wall.
So a full suite of plugins for every photographer, in fact.
Yes.
It's suitable for beginner photographer, for advanced, for professional photographer. And the software enables you to start your journey, your photo editing journey, and even probably to end it, meaning to achieve the best you can achieve in terms of knowledge, in terms of practice. And step by step, you can learn photography, you can learn photo editing thanks to the Nik Collection.
Yes, just to give a bit more details. So basically, when you open Nik Collection, you can start by using some presets. So that's a collection of filters you can apply on your photo, so you can test different looks directly. So usually if you work with Photoshop, for example, you've got to have in mind already what you want to achieve as an edit. Nik Collection allows you to test various things directly. And then once you find a look you like, you can refine it a little bit with a slider on the right-hand side of the filters, and you can achieve your perfect look. And once you've got that, you can actually save all these settings as your own presets to reapply them on other photos. That's the principle of Nik Collection.
So, live in color, dream in black and white. I'm going to choose color to start.
Fair enough.
Color photography, it's probably the most natural for many people. It's easy to take a camera and to shoot in color, nothing to do special, no particular setting to set up. What about the Nik Collection? How can we start a color workflow within the Nik Collection?
So there are various ways. I was just discussing, several plugins touching the color. So you've got Vivezza to do light adjustments. You've got Analog Effects to giving you this vintage look, and you've got Color Effects, which is the central toolbox for the color with more than 50 filters. You've got a lot of presets. And again, it allows you to really test some looks on your photos Within the filters, you've got some kind of basic filters, if I can say so, like HSL or levels and curves. Things you can find in other software, but then the power of the Nik Collection is then you can add more creative filters, like a bleach bypass, for example, which is gonna, completely transform your image, where dark tones will get much darker and light tones much lighter. You've got some soft focus to do nice portraits. You've got some contrast pro, which is gonna re-equilibrate your image, rebalance your image. So there are loads of different hues and different filters within Nik Color FX.
So super clear, Nik Color FX is the tool, the must-have for people who want to or pretend to do color photography. But what is new now, because this is the embargoed launch conference of the Nik Collection 8. So what's new in this color workflow?
Good question. I could explain everything in details, but it's linked to a lot of masking. I won't say a lot more. I think it will be easier to actually watch the demo now, and we can discuss every single feature just after the demo. It might be clearer for everybody.
Okay, so let's go for the demo.
I'm Photo Joseph, and I'm going to give you a quick tour of some of the newest features in Nik Collection 8 using color effects, silver effects, and analog effects. One of the most important capabilities of the Nik Collection has always been its masking features. Originating with the control point, its ability to isolate specific regions of an image based on luminance and chrominance has always been unparalleled. Over time, the control point has expanded to include control lines, control polygons, luminosity masks, and more. Well, now it's 2025, and Photoshop has given us a whole new type of masking through AI. Photoshop's ability to quickly and accurately select entire subjects in a photo opens up a whole new world of editing capabilities. So with this edition of the Nik Collection, one of the primary focuses was to provide seamless integration of masks. With Nik Collection 8, you now have the ability to use masks generated in Photoshop inside of the Nik Collection and use masks generated in the Nik Collection inside of Photoshop. Let's have a look. In this photo of Hero Square from Budapest, you can see that I already have a few different mask layers created, but I'm going to create one more for the sky. I'll take that original layer and duplicate it, call that sky, and then using the AI masking tools, I'll just click on the sky and add a mask to that layer. And now I've got a layer just of the sky. So you can see here, I have my statues, I have my entire monument, and I have the sky. I'll turn all of those back on and send them over to color effects. But first, let's take a look at the new Nik launching palette. Under the preferences, you'll see a few very important options. First, what do I want to send to the plugin? A combination of all visible layers or just the active layer? I'll leave it at the default of all visible layers. And then for masks, do I want to send all masks, just the selected masks, or none at all? Again, I'll leave it on the default of all masks. I can access each one of my individual plugins from here, which will simply open up its own dedicated palette. From its own launch palette, I can access the last edit that I made, my favorite presets, or my favorite filters. Or of course, I can open the plugin directly. Now in color effects, this should look familiar. I have on the left my presets, where I can choose any one of the existing presets, which will load a series of filters over here on the right, showing all the different filters that have been added with that preset. Or I can choose to create my own from scratch by simply going to the filters menu and adding the ones that I want. I'm going to start with Film Effects Modern Branded. And from here, I'll choose one of the cool film looks that I've got in here, which is a look that I really like for this photo, except that the contrast in the monument is a little bit too strong. Now, I could just go to the curves in here and adjust that to take some of that strength away, but I do really like the way that the sky looks right now. So I don't want to affect the entire image, I just want to affect the monument itself. To do that, I'm going to add another filter. Let's go ahead and add the levels and curves, and I'll start adjusting that. I'm going to set it to adjust just the luminance channel, and then I'll bring the shadows up just a little bit and the highlights down a little to flatten out the monument just a touch. Of course, this has affected the entire image, which is exactly what I didn't want. So now I want to limit this filter to the monument. To do that, I'll go to the new Photoshop Mask Import button. From here, I can choose which masks I want to import. In this case, I'll go for the entire monument, click plus, and now that filter is affecting only the monument. Next, I want to do something similar to the statues. They're getting a little bit lost against the blue sky in here, so let's change their saturation. I'll search for saturation, pull up my Brilliance and Warmth tool, and immediately add the mask for just the statues. So once again, I'll click on the import button and then choose the statues. Now, as I adjust the saturation, we can see that it's affecting just the statues in there. Let's say at this point that I like what I've got so far, but I'm not sure if I'm done or not. So I want to save a version of the image as we see it here. There's a couple different ways to do this. The first one is to simply go up to the top and choose Export as TIFF or Export as JPEG. Where that file will go is defined in the preferences. I've already set mine to the desktop, so I'll simply click on Export as TIFF, and it renders it out to the desktop. Now let's continue working with the photo. I'm going to add a little bit of a sunset look to this. So I'll type in gradient, add a graduated filter, and then let's give it a bit of a sunset vibe. So let's look for some nice rich orange colors in here. And the sunset's upside down, so I'll flip that over, bring the vertical shift up, and blend that in a little bit more. Looking all right, but obviously this is way too intense on the monument itself. You probably know where this is going. I'm going to mask out just to the sky. So one more time, I'm going to import from Photoshop the mask of the sky, and now it's applied only to the sky. But of course, on a real sunset, some of that light would be hitting the monument itself. So now we're going to combine the Photoshop mask with masks built in the Nik collection, and the two of them will blend together. Watch. First, let's look at the mask as it is. That's the mask that I'm working with. So again, applied entirely to the sky and not at all to the monuments. Now let's bring some of the monuments in using a control line. I'll click and drag up on the monument, and that's going to add in anything that has that base color and contrast of the concrete back into the image. But that's probably a bit too much, so how about I take the opacity of that and drag it down a bit. And you can see how the two different masks are blending together. Now I'll hide the mask and see what the result is. Still a little bit too strong, so I'll take the opacity back down a little bit. And there we go. Now I'm ready to send this back to Photoshop. I have a couple options from here of how I want to send this back. And one of those options is New Layer with Mask. In previous versions of the Nik collection, choosing this option would open up a palette where you could brush between the original and the affected image, but then once you hit apply, that rendered a permanent mask. It basically blended the two and you had no option to go back. So now what it does instead is it simply applies a Photoshop mask on export, like this. I'll select that option, click apply, and now you can see the image is here, but the mask is totally black. Meaning if I grab something as simple as a brush tool and start brushing that in, I'm now brushing between the two layers. And we can see that represented in the mask icon here. So that's a first look at some of the new features in Nik Collection 8.
So, wonderful demo, super efficient. Yes, it's about masking as you said, and probably it was easy to watch and to see that in action. And so now let's have probably, let's say, a more formal presentation in order for you to detail what we have seen in order to understand what is new.
Yes, so the local adjustment in Nik Collection have been used by users for a lot of time now. And they are still super useful, but with the arrival of the AI selection in Photoshop, we felt that it would be good to be able to use this inside Nik Collection, and we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we wanted to reuse what was already selected within Photoshop. So that's why we decided to reuse all the selection from Photoshop inside of Nik Collection. And to go a bit further, we wanted to make sure that people using the U-point technology to do some selections could reuse them inside Photoshop. So it's a kind of a full circle usage of the masks. On top of this, we wanted to make sure that we could transfer all the masks from one plugin to another. Up to version 7, you could create some masks and local adjustments in a plugin, and where you were moving from one plugin to another thanks to the new switcher, you had to kind of recreate these masks. If you had to reuse exactly the same one, it was a bit painful to do the job twice. So from now on, from Nik Collection 8, you'll be able to reuse the masks from Nik Collection and from Photoshop from one plugin to another. So that's another big addition to the masking in Nik Collection.
Talking about Photoshop, we saw during the demo that the Nik palette seems not to be there anymore, but replaced by something new. Why? And what is the benefit for the user having this new interface within Photoshop?
Yes, so we've decided to remove the palette and replaced it by a panel. That's what we call it because it's part of the Photoshop universe. So basically what we gain from that is obviously we gain a better visibility of your images because the palette is very useful, but quite often it is in the way of your image. So you kind of push it, reduce it, reopen it. And we felt that being able to dock the plugins as a normal panel in Photoshop would be a lot more useful. Also, in the palette, you had some options which were a bit hidden at the bottom left of the palette. So now these options to know how you're gonna work with your workflow. So if you want to send your current layer or a stack of layer into Nik, or when you apply a default preset within the panel, if it's gonna stop in Nik or go from Photoshop in Nik and come back directly into Photoshop, all of these kind of options now are a lot more visible and easier to use. An extra point is if you're not using all the plugins all the time, you don't have to dock everything. You know, if you're using, I don't know, 4 out of 7 on a daily basis and you're just using, I'm going to take one randomly, sharpener output, for example, because you don't output everything, you could still access them from the filter, but you don't have to dock specifically that plugin. And the last point, of course, and I think we're going to rediscuss that, is the new design you might have noticed of the icons of each plugin.
We will see that a bit later. You said that we can send mask from Photoshop to the Nik collection, to one plugin. We can also have plugins, we can also have mask going from one plugin to another plugin. That's all?
No, there's an extra thing we've introduced, an extra feature. In version 7, you had the opportunity to export your images as TIFF or JPEG directly without closing the application. So you had a button on the, and you still got it, on the top right of the application. That's something we refined a little bit, so it's easier to access. But what we did on top of that is allowing the user to actually save the result as an extra layer when you work within Photoshop. So it's a bit like a quick export, but it's within Photoshop. So what's going to happen is you're going to test some presets and filters, and you're going to have a button next to the apply button to say save this as a layer. It's going to register all these savings, and when you apply your last edit, then it's going to create your last edit and then all the layers.
All snapshots, all layers.
Yes. And all these new layers will be hidden by default, so it's going to reveal the one you've really worked on, and then you can activate or deactivate these extra layers.
So it means, for example, that you can apply multiple presets, save them as layers, and finally, within Photoshop, considering all layers you created, all presets you manage, in order to have a customer, your wife, your friends, saying, okay, this is the version I prefer, or this is this one, and so on.
Exactly, that was the goal of this feature.
Okay, interesting. 2 years ago, we introduced within version 6 a smart object option for plugins like color effects. Did you make any changes about that in order to have that more, let's say, useful, efficient?
I don't know if it's more useful, but it's, yeah, hopefully it's more efficient. So yes, up until this version, you had the apply button in Nik Collection. Next to it, you had a little tick box if you wanted to save as a smart object. Underneath that, you had a button called brush if you wanted to apply your results as a mask. And we can talk a little bit about this. And it was, a bit, it wasn't centralized, basically. So what we decided to do is to put everything on the one button. So you can decide in your preferences what's your default apply style. So you could say, by default, I want to do smart object. So you don't have to remember. Up to today, you had to tick the box every time. Now you don't have to do that. You will remember. But you got also the options to say, for this edit, I don't want to do a smart object. I want to do, like, let's say, a new layer. So you can go in your menu, do new layer, and just for this one, it's going to do a new layer. So I was talking about the brush. The brush option has been modified slightly. In previous versions, when you were clicking on the brush option, it would go back to Photoshop and it would create a mask, and you would have a Nik Collection small panel with a brush and eraser, which was good. You could, reveal part of the photo and hide part of the photo. The only issue is when you were clicking on apply, everything was merged and the mask would disappear, which is not the best if you want to come back to your edit later on and say, actually, I want to, retrieve a bit of this cloud or something in the landscape. So now with a new version, when you click on the new layer with mask, which is the new terminology, what it's going to do is going to come back to Photoshop the same way. It's going to create the mask the same way, but we're going to use the tools from Photoshop to work on the mask. And you can do it at any point. We will never remove the mask. We will never merge anything. So you can actually do a lot of things, carry on working. And then even if you need to copy this mask, you still got access to it all the time. So that's another big change in the workflow, and I think it might help a lot of users.
Clearly, I do agree. Okay, nice enhancement for not only Photoshop users, but also people who want to have those masks going from one plugin to another plugin. We are talking about color and color workflow, and in fact, Color Effects is not the only plugin you can manage color. I would like to highlight not all of them because you already have done that, but just to remind you about Nik Analog Effects, which is probably one of my favorite plugins in the creative side. Considering it's about fun, it's something super easy to manage, it's something super easy to start if you are looking for some vintage looks, but having the control over what you are trying to create, considering that all what we discussed about layers, mask, is for Color Effects, but also for Nik Analog Effects and all
the plugins. Exactly, yes.
Live in color, dream in black and white. So now let's dream.
Let's dream,
start
yes.
with black and white. Same question, how to start a black and white workflow within the Nik Collection?
Okay, so the go-to plugin for black and white editing is going to be Nik Silver Effects. When you open the interface, it's going to look very much like Color Effects or Analog Effects. You've got the filters on the left and presets on the left, and then you've got some settings on the right. For people who used to work a lot with Silver Effects, been working for years with Silver Effects, we've changed things a little bit. Basically, it's more homogeneous with Color Effects. In the past, you had all the settings on the right-hand side. So it was a long panel with all the settings possible. So it's very much like a dark room where everything was on the shelf, but sometimes there's too much stuff on the shelf. So what we decided to do is to do some cleanup. And what we did is most of the filters now are on the left and right, on the left-hand side, sorry, left-hand side. So for example, you don't always need to use vignetting, or you don't always want to put some borders. It's just depending on your topic, on your subject. So that's going to be on the left-hand side. If you want to use them, you'll have to click on the plus button to add them to right-hand side, exactly like in Color or Analog Effects. There's one filter we kept, and we reorganized this, and it's a film type because, as was mentioning, it's very much like a digital darkroom. So when we're doing some analog photography, we start with a film, and the film's got a sensitivity. It reacts to colors various ways depending on the type of film you've got. So that's basically the preloaded filter in Nik Silver Effects today. In the past, it was in the middle of the panel, so you were doing basic adjustment, you were doing several things, and then reaching that, which will possibly completely change the style of your photo. So we felt it was better to start as you would do in normal photography or analog photography with the film, and then work from there. So that's one of the big change. The second big thing, I think, at least in the usage, which is really important, is we've put a little thumbnail of your original image. Because although you're going to edit in black and white, the image you're going to work with is a color image. So that's why it's more a digital darkroom, because it's not something you can do
No.
with a normal film. You can't, play with the colors when you took your photo. But we've got the opportunity in Nik Silver Effect actually to have an effect on the colors. So let's say you've got a blue and a red, which are very different colors, but in the luminosity, they're about the same level. When you work with a classic film, you have a level of gray, possibly, and it's going to be difficult to detach, one color from the other. Because we can have some actions on the colors in Nik Silver Effects, you're going to have the options to brighten the blue, for example. So the contrast between the two colors will be much stronger, and you can do a lot more with your images. So having this little thumbnail on the left-hand side will help you to identify which color you're going to work with.
Maybe let's have a demo. I know you are enthusiastic talking about those
You're
new
right.
features. That's super interesting. Maybe it's going to be more visual having the demo, and then
we'll come back to that. Yes,
on,
you're right.
All features.
We could do that.
Okay, let's do that. Let's go for the demo, please.
In the previous demo, you saw how to bring masks from Photoshop into Nik 8. Now you'll see how masks are additionally shared between plugins and how masks created in the Nik collection can be shared back to Photoshop. Let's start in Silver Effects. For this photo, I'm not going to do any masking in Photoshop, but instead go straight into Silver Effects. Right away, you'll notice a big difference in Silver Effects, and that is that all the filters are no longer on the right. Now Silver Effects works more like Color Effects, where none of the filters are added until you need them. I can either add them manually, or by choosing one of the presets here, the filters that are needed for that preset will be added on the right. If I revert the image back to its neutral state, then all those filters go away. There is one thing that's still here though, and that is the film types. You can think of film types like your original black and white processing, how the image is converted from color to black and white. What is the basic film stock, the grain pattern, the color sensitivity, and so on. It's actually important that you start with this before adding other filters, because if you add a filter first and then go back and change the basic processing, the entire look of the image can change. So you really do want to start with the film types. You have a bunch of different film types that you can start with, and of course each one of these provides a unique base look for your image. I'll choose this one to start with. One of the most important parts of a film's look is its color sensitivity. How sensitive was the film to red colors, to yellow colors, blue, and so on? And by adjusting these, you can dramatically change the overall look of your image. The problem is that you don't necessarily know what part of the image you're changing other than just dragging the sliders around and seeing what happens. And the reason for that is you can't see the original color image. Well, you used to not be able to, but now with Nik 8, you can. If I go down here to the bottom left corner, you'll see there's a new Original Image tab. That shows me the original color image, so now I know exactly what parts of the image I'll be affecting with each one of these sliders. For example, here we see a lot of blue and purple in this part of the photo. If I go over here to my blue sliders and change that, you'll see that that's affecting that part of the image. So now we just have a lot more control and knowledge over what we're doing. So let's start affecting this photo. It's a photo of a wine cellar, and the wine bottles over here on the edges are getting a bit lost. It's just a little bit too crunchy. We can see that my black levels have been dropped quite a bit, so I'm going to recover that, maybe even raise it up a little bit, about like so. Now the bottles look better, but the wine racks themselves are way too bright. What color are the wine racks? Well, if I look at my color image, I can see that they're largely yellow and red. So if I go to my film sensitivity and take the yellows and the reds down a bit, I should be able to darken all of those colors in the image. Now that I've done my basic black and white conversion, I can add other filters to this, knowing that my underlying layer is not going to change dramatically. I'll go ahead and add a bit of a sepia tone, like this, to the image. Now let's continue to refine the image. I'm going to add a basic adjustment, and I want to darken the floor. So to do that, I'm going to use a control polygon, which was added in the previous version of Nik Collection, and draw a polygon over the floor area, very quickly outlining this shape like so. To preview the mask that I've just drawn, I can click on this icon here, and we'll see the mask that I've just created. Now to darken that floor, I'll just go to the brightness slider and pull that down a bit. Next, this bright spot on the back wall has lost some of its texture and structure, so let's fix that. To do that, I'm going to use a new local adjustment, the new color mask. This will allow me to create a mask based off of the color of the original image. So here I've just clicked where the image is predominantly blue, and if we take a look at the mask that I've just created, we can see that it is affecting the blue areas. If I grab that color mask point and drag it around the image, you can see how it's masking specific colors depending on where I position it. But I'll go ahead and put it back here towards blue, and then let's refine that. Under the mask options, you can see exactly the color range that's been selected. And you can see on this hue band that it's selected largely blue. If I want to expand or contract that, I can start by feathering that in and out, or expanding the entire selected range. You'll notice that these are linked together right now. If I click this little chain icon, it is going to unlink those ranges, so now I can adjust them independently. I really want to narrow this down, so let's contract that to right about there. Now I'll hide the mask, and let's take the structure of that part of the image and crank it way up. Excellent. Earlier I showed you how if you want to save the current state of an image, you can export a JPEG or a TIFF file of the image as it currently is. But there's another way to do that. Instead of saving it out as a separate file, you can save it as a hidden layer inside of Photoshop. To do that, simply click on Send as Layer. Now this version, as we see it currently, will be in Photoshop, rendered out as a hidden layer so that when we go back to Photoshop, it's there waiting for us. I'm not quite done with this image, but I am done with it in Silver Effects. Now I could simply apply this and then reopen it in another plugin, or I could send it directly to the plugin from here within Silver Effects. Watch this. Up in the top right, I can choose to send this image and its masks to any of the other plugins. This allows me to keep all the masking work I've done in this plugin, including generated and imported masks, and carry them over to another. Now that I'm in Analog Effects, let's add a little bit of a light leak. Click on the plus here. I'm going to choose from my crisp collection, and I'll grab this one here that I like. Let's position that kind of right in the center. Maybe even bring up the intensity a little bit. Looking pretty good, however, it's a bit too strong on the floor here. Well, remember, I already created a mask for the floor over in Silver Effects, and that mask is available for me here in Analog Effects. Just like I'd import a Photoshop mask, I'll click on the Import button, and there we can see the masks that I created in Silver Effects, my control polygon and the color mask. The polygon for the floor is the one that I want, so I'll add that in. And it is the entire polygon, so I could even adjust this if I wanted to. But in my case, all I'm going to do is take the strength of that texture down a bit. That's better. Now let's save this as another layer in Photoshop because I want to keep on playing. So I'll send that out as a new layer and then add something else. How about I add a quick picture frame to this? We'll choose something really dramatic and call it a day. Now I'm ready to apply this. But there is one more option in here that I want to show you. I can now choose to include the plugin masks back in Photoshop. The one that I want is that control polygon for the floor, so I'll go ahead and save that, and now click Apply. Now we see a couple of things happening here in Photoshop. First of all, there's the final image that I just created, but here's the hidden layers of the two other versions as I was playing with it. So there's the one from Silver Effects, the original from Analog Effects, and the final version. Where's that mask that I saved though? Well, there it is, under Channels. There is the control polygon mask that I created in Silver Effects. So now you can see that the masks created in Photoshop can be brought into the Nik Collection, and the masks created in the Nik Collection can be brought back to Photoshop. It gives you the ultimate flexibility in working with masks.
Wonderful demo. I'm not saying that what you said was not wonderful before, obviously. Wonderful demo. Okay, let's take this opportunity to recap about what we saw and maybe to discover what you didn't speak about already.
Okay, yeah, fine.
So, Nik Silver FX, what is it about?
So yes, of course. So as we've seen the demo, so you've seen this little thumbnail I was talking about, and you can see how useful this can be when you work on a photo. Depending on the subject, you might keep in mind that your photo was, like in the example, more of a color. But if you've got a lot of people wearing different colors, then this little image is very useful. And when you use the color mask, again, it helps you to identify exactly what you're working with.
So before the demo and during the demo, we have the presentation of the color reference image, so this little image in color in order to help you to achieve your perfect black and white conversion, as well as this new user experience in order to have something more homogeneous, having filters and presets on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, the tools, the filters you activated. There is probably something new
Yeah, there are some new things. I mean, part of reorganizing the shelves that I was saying earlier on, a big thing is when you were applying a preset up until Nik Collection 7, applying a preset will change some of the settings on the right-hand side, but it wasn't always very clear what has been changed. So now, when you apply a preset, only the filters contained in this preset will be applied on the right-hand side. So it's much faster and much clearer in the usage what you might want to change. Something else is we've added some local adjustments to two filters. Clear view, which is going to be super useful because clear view changes a lot your image, but you don't always want the full image to be changed. Sometimes you want to focus on a subject within the image to give it more character. So we've got that, and we've got also the local adjustment on the selective tones, and we think that's going to be very helpful again for your editing. And we've got new color masks. So we could say it's strange to talk about color masks in Silver Effects. Actually, the new color masks, of course, are available in all of the plugins. But we really wanted to talk more about color within Silver Effects. So that's why we're discussing it now, because you could select a range of color within your image to apply specific rendering on it. And working with the color mask like you used to do with the luminosity mask in Nik Collection 7 is really powerful. The last thing is that because now you've got filters in Silver Effects like you've got in Color Effects, we've introduced the filter looks. So when you're in Color Effects, you click on a filter and underneath you got some kind of presets or variations of the filters. You've got the same thing in Nik Silver Effects, which means that if you're not familiar with one of the filters, you can actually try it out really quickly. Instead of playing with the cursors, you can play with these variations of this filter and see what it can do for you.
This is clearly at the heart of the DNA of the Nik Collection. Having stuff easy to start, easy to get inspired, and the full control on the final result if you are not, let's say, 100% happy with the result, just because you are looking for your own signature, but you need to have that ignition in order to start your creativity.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, we talked about Silver Effects, which is at the heart of the, obviously, black and white process. In fact, to achieve the perfect black and white, you can use other plugins. So for color workflow, I talked about analog effects, and I would like to talk about a technical plugin, because it's not just about creativity, the Nik Collection, it's also about technically achieving the result. And Sharpener, Nik Sharpener, is probably as well one of my favorite technical plugins, because as soon as you try it, you adopt it. Nik Sharpener, and especially in my case, Nik Sharpener, the output sharpener, is the plugin to use when you are happy with the result on a creative point of view. Then you are gonna take your image and put it somewhere on social network, print it, give it to a friend in order to have that in a huge frame TV screen, for example. You need to prepare or to finalize your image, and Nik Sharpener output has been created for that. It's super easy to use, super intuitive. You don't need to be an expert in printing photography, for example, which can be quite tricky and quite impressive. Nik Sharpener is super intuitive, and it's part of black and white workflow, but it's also part of color workflow, obviously.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, a lot of people use it when they print images, and it makes one really. It's the modification and the change of view is really important, but it works as well when you post photos on Instagram, because some of the part of the image will be much sharper, and it will be a lot more pleasant to the eye and more readable, if I can say so. So either for medias or for printing, it's a really good plugin. Yes,
like all other plugins of the Nik Collection, in fact. You probably saw during the demo that we introduced some slight changes in the let's say, look of the Nik collection for this version 8 for a super good reason. In fact, we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Nik collection.
Yes.
So happy anniversary, Maurice.
Thank you very much.
It started in 1995. You are probably aware of that because we, in fact, repeated this message according to other milestones like finishing the rewriting of the Nik collection or introducing a new plugin or some new features. So we are not gonna highlight all key milestones that you do have on your screen currently. Part of the press kit, you will find a detailed explanation of each milestone, but I would like to probably go on some slight improvements part of this 30th anniversary. What do you want to start with?
Probably the logo and the icons, I would say.
Let's go for the logo.
Okay, so from 1995 till today, the logo changed a little bit. So there was a big shift at some point where we had this kind of lens logo a little bit in orange and gray. We felt that we could make it a bit more modern, but we didn't want to change it too much because this logo represents really what is Nik Collection. People recognize it and people like this logo. So all we did was removing some of the shadows and we tilted it a little bit so it looks a bit more like a lens, which I think works quite well. And at the same time, we've decided to update the icons for the plugins. So this change is a bit more drastic, I would say, even though we kept the color from the previous icons. So people familiar with Nik Collection will recognize the red from Color Effects, the black and white from Silver, of course, but even the orange of Analog or the yellow of Vivezza. What we've changed is we took the outer shape of the Nik Collection logo, so it's more like a family. It goes together well, and decided to put the first letter of each plugin. So for the new users, it was easier to identify which plugin they would like to work with.
So, 30th anniversary, and not like human, year after year, it's becoming more modern, more nice to watch and stuff like that. Anyway, so now it's time to summarize what we presented during the demo, what you explained during your presentation, in order for you to have a good overview of this new version of the Nik Collection, the version 8. So we introduced fantastic new options for Photoshop users with many options for having masks created in Photoshop available within the Nik Collection, having masks created in the Nik Collection available within Photoshop, and having also a new panel. So we forget about the Nik palette, and now we do have a new panel which able all Photoshop users to organize the Nik plugin the way they want, and also to use this panel in order to personalize, to select some settings, some default setting, in order to maximize the way they are going to use the Nik Collection. Those enhancements are not only for Photoshop users, because you can now create a mask within one plugin and send it to another plugin using the the switch button. Sorry, the switch button we introduced last year with the Nik Collection 7 at that time. Nik Silver Effect has been enhanced in order to propose a better black and white workflow, more intuitive. We have a new interface for, let's say, a smoother experience, introducing some, let's say, small feature but super useful. So having this color reference image, which is absolutely impossible when you are doing analog black and white. And with now filters available within Nik Silver Effects, obviously there are also availability of filter looks, so variation of filter, in order for you to initiate your creativity, to start with something existing and not to start with a blank sheet. We introduced color masks not only in Nik Silver Effects but in all plugins in order for you to manage your color selectivity the way you want, considering the plugin you are using. And finally, we upgraded the quick export button in order to switch quickly and easily to TIFF, JPEG or Photoshop layer if you are using the Nik Collection within Photoshop. Regarding prices of the Nik Collection, you can discover on your screen the price for both a new license or the upgrade price. I remind you that the upgrade price is a discounted price for Nik Collection 6 and 7 existing owners. I would like to remind you as well that all licenses of DxO, and so the Nik Collection license as well, is a perpetual license. So when you buy the Nik Collection, it's to you for life. And talking about price, we had to talk about zero price, because you can try the Nik Collection for free. It's free during 30 days. There is no technical limitation, and you don't need any credit card or any payment method in order to download and to try the Nik Collection. The Nik Collection 8 will be available for everyone starting May the 6th at 3 p.m., which is also the end of the embargo. We thank you for watching this presentation. We are super happy to have you discovering this new version. Thank you, Boris.
Thank you, Nicolas.
To share your passion about the Nik Collection.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And see you soon.
Thank you very much for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.